You're not serious, Mason said, holding the leash. Kira's tail wagged like a metronome of mischief. Dead serious. He sighed, clipped it on, and the most absurd walk in galactic history began. Subscribe for more heartwarming sci-fi love stories. Sunlight poured through the apartment blinds, catching on dust motes and the flick of a russet tail. The scent of toast hung in the air along with the faint hum of a city that never quite stopped buzzing even after the galactic accord made alien hybrids as common as morning coffee. Mason Voss sat at the table, mug in hand, the picture of weary calm. Across from him, his fox-eared wife, Kira, crouched on the floor, rummaging through a drawer with all the stealth of a thunderstorm. He'd fought through war zones quieter than this. The morning had started like any other. Mason up before dawn brewing his dark roast while Kira managed to burn something that allegedly began as bread. "Don't give me that look," she said, ears twitching defensively as he stared at the smoke curling from the toaster. "I'm not giving you a look," he said flatly. "You're absolutely giving me a look." He took another sip of coffee. "That's just my face." Kira puffed out her cheeks. Something he'd learned meant she was about 3 seconds away from either sulking or hatching a new disaster. Her tail swished, brushing against the chair leg as she rummaged through the junk drawer, mumbling to herself about finding the perfect one. Mason leaned back, one brow raised. "You're not about to start another cultural experiment, are you? Last time you tried that, we ended up with 12 gallons of fox milk tea fermenting in the bathtub. That was for science," she shot back, voice muffled as she leaned in deeper. "And this isn't about tea. This is about bonding." "Bonding?" Mason repeated, toned flat as a plasma line. "Should I be worried?" Kara spun around, and that's when he saw it. The leash, not some sci-fi gadget or alien ritual object. Just a plain brown leather leash slooped neatly around her fingers. She was grinning ear to ear, her fangs just visible in the morning light. "Mason," she said proudly, "I want you to walk me." The silence that followed was so profound. Even the coffee machine seemed to hesitate. Mason blinked once, twice. He set down his mug with the slow deliberation of a man processing tactical nonsense. "You want me to walk you?" "Exactly," she said brightly, tail wagging hard enough to make the air stir. Humans walk their beloved canids every morning for bonding, fresh air, and mutual health improvement. I read it in 3 separate databases. He rubbed his temples. "Kira, you're not a dog." "Obviously not," she said indignantly. "But hybrid physiology has ancestral parallels with Terran vulpines, which means the social benefits are transferable." Mason stared at her like a man who'd seen combat, aliens, and bureaucracy, and decided this conversation was still somehow the most dangerous. "So, you want me to put a leash on you," he summarized, deadpan, "and take you outside?" "Yes," she said, tail wagging faster. "Around the neighborhood. There's a park and a fountain, and I can show you how gracefully I can walk on all 4s. "Absolutely not." He cut in. 2 feet only. We're not reenacting Animal Planet. Her ears drooped. Then slowly she tried a different angle. "Mason," she said softly, stepping close, eyes wide and shimmering with a sincerity that had leveled his defenses since the day they met. "It would make me happy." He exhaled through his nose, quiet and resigned. The sound of a man who'd long accepted his role as handler of chaos. "You'd really be happy doing this." She nodded eagerly, bells on her wrist jingling. "More than anything." He scratched his jaw, the stubble rasping. "Then fine," he said finally, smirking. "But if anyone calls the cops, you're the one explaining this to them." Her reaction was immediate and explosive. She gasped, tail puffing, ears shooting straight up. "You mean it? You'll actually do it? I said I'd walk you, didn't I?" She practically tackled him in delight, nearly spilling his coffee again. "Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll go get ready." She darted off toward the bedroom in a blur of auburn fur and laughter, muttering to herself about which collar looked classy yet confident. Mason just leaned back, pinched the bridge of his nose, and chuckled under his breath. "Gods above," he murmured. "What did I marry?" Her voice floated down the hall. "Someone amazing." He shook his head, smiling despite himself. There were moments, quiet ones, between her chaos, when he remembered why he loved her. She was fire in a world that had gone cold. After the wars, the dust, the endless missions where humanity and alien kind were always at odds, Kira had reminded him what peace actually looked like. And sometimes peace looked like agreeing to walk your fox girl wife around the block on a leash. He finished his coffee, stood up, and grabbed his jacket. All right, sweetheart, he called toward the bedroom. Let's go make the neighbors question reality. From inside came a delighted yelp and the sound of bells jingling in reply. The bedroom door cracked open and Mason nearly dropped his keys. Kira stepped out in full ceremony. Flame red hair brushed to a gleam, fox ears perked tall, and a golden sundress that fluttered with every flick of her tail. Around her neck sat a delicate collar, dark leather embossed with faint silver patterns, a small charm shaped like a paw dangling from the front. And in her hands, reverently held like a royal artifact, was the leash. So, she asked, beaming with a kind of joy that could melt neutron steel. Do I look walkable? Mason exhaled through a quiet laugh. You look ridiculous. Her ears flattened. Rude. Beautifully ridiculous. He corrected, moving to meet her halfway. Like a magazine cover for a domestic chaos monthly. She gave him a playful shove. You're lucky I love you. Yeah, he said, looping the leash through his fingers. I remind myself of that daily. He clipped it gently to the collar, careful, almost ceremonial. The little click of metal on leather echoed faintly through the apartment. Kira froze, her eyes widening in delight, tail fluffing to full volume. Oh my stars, she whispered. It's official. Mason straightened, hand on his hip. You realize there's no going back after this. Once we step outside, there's a 50% chance someone live streams it. Then I'll pose, she declared, hands on hips, tail waving proudly. Let them see what love looks like. He chuckled lowly, shaking his head as he grabbed his jacket. You're lucky you're cute. Correction, she said, wagging a finger. I'm adorable. They made their way toward the front door, Ka practically bouncing beside him. Every time she caught her reflection in a window, she gasped softly and fixed her posture like a performer about to hit the stage. Mason, meanwhile, wore the same expression he'd had when marching into war zones. Dead calm, a veteran of her enthusiasm. Should I bark? She asked suddenly halfway through tying her sandals. He blinked. What? For immersion. Dogs bark when they're walked. Kira, you bark and I'm going back inside. She pouted. You're no fun. I'm already walking a foxwoman on a leash. I think I've hit my weekly fun quota. When they finally opened the door, morning sunlight hit them both, soft and golden across the hallways of their apartment complex. Mason adjusted the leash in his hand while Kyrie inhaled deeply, eyes fluttering shut in pure bliss. She hummed. You smell that? Fresh air, adventure, the thrill of scandal. Smells like laundry detergent and mild regret. Mason replied. Down the corridor, an old neighbor froze mid-step, clutching a grocery bag. Mason gave a casual nod. Morning. The man blinked, stared at the leash, then at Curia, who waved enthusiastically. Good morning, Mr. Ellers. Ellers just nodded numbly and shuffled away. As the couple made it to the lobby, Kira leaned closer. Did you see his face? He was astonished. I think his brain's rebooting. Outside, the city hum met them. A mix of hover cars, early chatter, and the faint scent of fried street food. Kira's tail swayed behind her, bouncing with every step. Mason's grip on the leash was light, almost symbolic, and she clearly reveled in that balance. Freedom tethered by affection. They walked past their first set of witnesses, an elderly woman watering flowers and a delivery drone operator. Both stopped to stare. Kira flashed her brightest smile, while Mason simply tipped his chin in greeting. The woman blinked. Is that your pet? Kira gasped theatrically. Wife. Wife. Mason coughed into his fist. Yeah, she's a housebroken though, so we're good. The lady nearly fainted. Kira elbowed him. Don't say that, he smirked. You wanted authenticity. She huffed, but couldn't stop smiling. You're insufferable. Married me anyway. As they crossed onto the sidewalk, Kira adjusted her posture again. Upright, elegant, every motion deliberate, tail flowing behind like silk in the wind. She looked radiant in the sun, a strange and beautiful sight amid the humdrum humans. Mason found himself smiling more than he expected. A child nearby tugged on his mother's sleeve. Mommy, why is that lady on a leash? The mother froze. Kaya turned, crouched slightly, and said with cheerful sincerity, because sometimes love looks different, little one. The kid nodded solemnly. Cool. Mason snorted. You just philosophized a 6-year-old. She puffed her chest. It's a gift. They reached the park gates, wind rippling through the trees, and Kyrie bounced on her toes. See, no disasters, no arrests. Maybe the universe rewards honesty. Or maybe everyone's just afraid to make eye contact, he said. Kia looped her arm through his and squeezed. You're smiling, though? He was. He hadn't realized it until she pointed it out. Something about her joy was infectious, and seeing her so unabashedly happy, tail wagging, eyes bright, made every bit of awkwardness worth it. All right, he said finally, a hint of laughter in his tone. Let's see how long you can keep that energy up before someone mistakes you for an off-duty circus act. Oh, I plan to be magnificent, Curious said proudly. And with that, the two of them stepped through the park gates, one calm, one incandescent, ready to turn a quiet morning into a spectacle of love, laughter, and a very confused neighborhood. The park was alive with morning bustle, kids chasing drones, joggers syncing wrist trackers, and a few retirees feeding avenscents that cooped like metal pigeons. In the middle of it all walked Mason Voss and Kira, the galaxy's most bewildering couple. She walked tall and radiant, tails swaying with every step. The collar gleamed under sunlight. The leash trailed lightly between them. If she noticed the staring, she didn't show it. Mason, meanwhile, had perfected the 1000-y stare of a man pretending this was just another Tuesday. So he muttered under his breath, still thinking this was a good idea. Best idea ever, she whispered back, grinning. Look how happy everyone looks. He followed her gaze. A group of teenagers had stopped to film them, whispering and snickering. Uh-huh, he said dryly. Yeah, they're overjoyed. Kara leaned close, her tail flicking playfully against his side. You worry too much. Humans and hybrids coexist now. You're just not used to being the talk of the park. I'm used to people staring, Mason replied. Usually because I was carrying a rifle, she laughed. See, we've upgraded. No weapons, just accessories. As they passed a fountain, she spotted a mother duck leading a trail of ducklings. Tiny automatons programmed to mimic natural behavior. Kira crouched beside the fountain, fascinated. Oh, look at them. They follow her perfectly. Maybe I should practice that level of obedience. Mason raised an eyebrow. You obedient? That'll be the day. Her ears twitched. Rude again? He gave a little tug on the leash, smirking. There, that's a start. She gasped, scandalized. You wouldn't dare. He shrugged casually. Guess I would. Curious face flamed crimson, and she stood upright in a huff, crossing her arms. You're lucky this is adorable, Mason boss. I know. They continued down the paved path, and soon the air was filled with a mixture of amusement and disbelief from passers-by. Someone whispered, Is that an actual leash? Another replied, I think it's romantic, actually. The whispers followed them like background music. Curious steps grew lighter, her smile softer. She didn't seem to care anymore who stared. She was glowing, her joy too bright to be dimmed by gossip. Mason found himself watching her out of the corner of his eye, realizing he couldn't remember the last time she'd looked that genuinely happy. They reached the park's food stall area, and Kira tugged the leash slightly, pointing toward a vendor. They're selling grilled skewer snacks. Can we? Mason gave her a teasing look. You planning to beg for them, too? I might if it works. He rolled his eyes but guided her over. The vendor, a burly man with cybernetic eyes, looked up and froze mid-turn, his mechanical pupils dilated as they locked onto the leash. Can I help you folks? He stammered. Kira beamed. 2 skewers, please. Oh, an extra sauce. Right, the man said slowly, handing them over. Nice a collar. Thank you, Curious said cheerfully. Mason handed over credits with a calmness that suggested this was already the strangest part of his day. Don't ask, he said. They found a bench under a cherrywood tree, sat side by side, and ate in companionable silence. The moment was almost peaceful until a small drone hovered nearby, blinking red. Recording mode. Korea squinted at it. Are we trending yet? Mason deadpanned. If this ends up online, I'm changing my name. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. Let them talk. You always say humans are proud creatures, right? Maybe seeing this will remind them that love doesn't always fit their definitions. Mason chewed on that, staring out across the park. You always do that, he said finally. Do what? Make nonsense sound like wisdom. Curious smiled softly. It's a talent. You should appreciate it more. Her hand brushed his small, warm, and deliberate. The leash between them seemed almost symbolic now, a reminder that connection didn't always need logic. He squeezed her fingers lightly, saying nothing. A passing jogger gave them a thumbs up. "You two are adorable," she called. Kira's ears perked in delight. "See, public approval." Mason just chuckled. That jogger was wearing a shirt that says, "Marry your synth." I'm not sure her endorsement counts. Curious Tail flicked at his arm. "Stop ruining the moment. I'm just keeping us grounded. You're impossible. And yet you still drag me out of the house." They both laughed, then real laughter, the kind that echoed brighter than any attention they got. Around them, the city carried on, the world spinning in its usual rhythm. Kira leaned back on the bench, watching clouds drift through the pale blue sky. "You know," she said softly, "I used to be afraid people would laugh at us. That being a hybrid would make me look silly next to you." Mason turned toward her. "You ever seen yourself in a mirror? You could outshine a starship." Her ears went pink, but she smiled. "That's the nicest thing you've ever said." He smirked. "Don't get used to it." They sat there until the breeze shifted, carrying the scent of rain and street food. Mason looked at her again, the way her tail draped over her lap, the playful sparkle in her eyes, and realized something quietly profound. For all her chaos, Kia had turned his life from static into color. And maybe, just maybe, walking her wasn't so crazy after all. By the time the afternoon sun began tilting west, the park had grown livelier. Families picnicking under trees, joggers looping around the pond, and vendors calling out offers for cold drinks. Mason and Kia walked among them, hand in hand, the leash still loosely held in his other. Everywhere they went, heads turned. Some reactions were curious, some amused, and a few flat-out stunned. Mason barely noticed anymore. He'd settled into that stoic kind of calm he'd perfected long ago. The same one that used to carry him through battlefield chaos. Only now, instead of dodging gunfire, he was dodging whispers. Kira, of course, was loving every second. "Oh, look at that couple over there," she whispered, gesturing with her chin toward two humans on a blanket. "They're holding hands just like us." "Yeah," Mason muttered, minus the collar and leash part. She giggled and leaned closer, whispering, "Maybe they'll get ideas. Please don't start an interspecies fashion trend." Her grin widened, mischievous as always. "Too late, Mason. I'm setting standards." They strolled through a row of blooming trees. Kyria paused to sniff a cluster of blossoms, her ears twitching with contentment. The sight made Mason stop, too. Not because of the flowers, but because of the look on her face. She had that same expression she wore the day they'd first met. Unguarded wonder. Back then, she'd been an off-world visitor, part of the first wave of Vixen hybrids sent as goodwill envoys after the Accord. Mason had been assigned as her human liaison back when he still wore a uniform. He remembered thinking she'd never last a week on Earth's chaotic streets. But she'd adapted faster than anyone, laughing at every new thing, fearless in a world that didn't always welcome her. And now, years later, she still looked at everything with that same childlike awe. "Hey," he said quietly as she plucked a blossom from a branch. "You doing okay?" She turned, tilting her head. "Why wouldn't I be?" He shrugged. "You know, the stairs, the recording drones. You've got the whole park watching us." Curious smiled gently and stepped close, holding the blossom up to his chest. "Mason, when I first came here, everyone stared, too. They saw a fox girl trying to fit in. But you never stared. You just handed me a towel when I tripped in that fountain." He smirked faintly. "You fell in head first." "Exactly. And you didn't laugh. You helped me out and said, 'You good?' Like it was no big deal. That was the first time I realized humans weren't all afraid of us." Her voice softened. "Now, if they stare, let them. I'm happy you're with me. That's what matters." He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed, half a smile tugging his lips. "You make it sound easy." She beamed. "It is easy. You just overthink." Mason chuckled. "You know, I used to be intimidating." "You still are," she said brightly, looping her arm through his. "Just domesticated now." He barked out a laugh. "Great. Mason Voss, the tamed mercenary. I should make you a collar next," she teased. He gave her a warning look. "Don't push your luck." Kira giggled, but before she could reply, a small drone zipped down in front of them, hovering at eye level. Its hollow light blinked red, scanning. Local newset chirped a metallic voice. "Pardon me, citizens. Mind answering a few questions for our segment on interspecies cultural bonding?" Mason groaned. "No interviews. Kira, however, was already striking a pose. Hello. Of course, we don't mind. The drone whirred happily. Fantastic. You appear to be engaging in what looks like a traditional pet owner-walk dynamic, but with an interesting twist. Would you say this activity strengthens your mutual patience? Mason interrupted. It strengthens our mutual patience. Kira elbowed him. And love, she added with a proud grin. Lots of love. Of course, the drone beeped. And the leash, symbolic or functional? Symbolic. Mason said instantly. Kira leaned into him. Emotional support tether. The drone hovered in delighted confusion for a few seconds before flying off. Mason groaned again. Congratulations. We're probably tomorrow's morning headline. Hero veteran walks fox for love. Curious said dramatically. I can see it now. Man loses dignity in public experiment. Mason countered. They both laughed until they were breathless. When the laughter faded, Kira took his hand again and rested her head briefly against his arm. You're not embarrassed anymore, are you? Mason looked around. The gawking neighbors, the amused onlookers, the hollow drones still buzzing overhead, and then backed down at her. No, he admitted. Not even a little. They started walking again, the leash swinging lazily between them. The moment felt oddly peaceful, like the eye of a storm. Around them, the park continued its rhythm. Life, noise, laughter, motion. But for Mason, it had all gone quiet. Because when he saw Korea, ears perked, eyes shining, tail wagging in the sunlight, he realized something that settled deep and true. He didn't care what anyone thought. He didn't care how strange they looked or how many lenses caught their image. All he saw was her happiness. And for the first time in a long while, he realized he was happy too. Kira turned back to him and smiled. Told you walking me would be fun. He squeezed her hand. Yeah, he said softly. You were right. She blinked in mock shock. Wait, say that again louder. He smirked. Don't push it. Her laugh rang bright through the park, chasing the last of his hesitation away. By late afternoon, the sun had dipped low enough to bathe the streets in amber. Kira insisted on taking the long route home through the residential district, where the sidewalks were clean, the neighbors nosy, and Mason's patience perpetually tested. Come on, she said, tugging at his sleeve. We can't just stop now. You promised to walk. That implies distance. I didn't realize there was a legal definition. Mason said deadpan. There's when I'm involved. And so they went. The moment they turned onto their block, the first wave of stairs hit like a photon blast. A man trimming hedges froze mid-snip. A pair of teenagers walking a hoverboard dog stopped dead, both whispering furiously. One of them recorded discreetly, or at least tried to. Kira, of course, noticed and waved at them. Lovely day, isn't it? The teens blinked, startled. Yeah, you a cool caller. Thank you, she chirped. Mason gave her a sideways glance. You enjoy this too much. Public morale is important, Mason. I'm contributing. Pretty sure you're confusing morale with entertainment. Her tail flicked playfully at his leg. Same difference. They passed the Hendersons' house next, a retired couple known for gossiping like it was a competitive sport. Sure enough, both of them were on the porch sipping tea, jaws slack. Afternoon, Mason greeted calmly as if he were taking out the trash instead of walking his fox girl wife on a leash. Good afternoon, Mrs. Henderson replied, blinking rapidly. New, accessory cultural exchange. Mason said smoothly. Korea beamed. It's for bonding. Oh, Mrs. Henderson said faintly. How lovely. As they walked off, Mason leaned down and muttered, we're going to be the talk of the neighborhood for the next decade. Kuria giggled. Then let's give them something to talk about. They reached the park at the end of the street, small, open, surrounded by low fences, and dotted with children playing. Kira slowed her pace, her tail swaying lazily behind her. The leash tugged softly between them, more symbolic than anything. Then Mason, feeling mischievous, said, So what happens if you see a fire hydrant? She stopped cold. Excuse me. He smirked. You know, instinct kicks in. Mason Voss, she barked, scandalized, ears snapping flat. I am not. He laughed, genuinely laughed, and it echoed off the nearby walls. Kidding. And Kira, relax. She huffed, cheeks puffed. That was rude. Was it funny though? Maybe a little, she admitted, trying not to smile. Her pout melted when he reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. You're adorable when you get all indignant. I prefer dignified. Can't have both, sweetheart. She pretended to glare, but her tail betrayed her, slowly wagging side to side, rhythmically, a metronome of contentment. They resumed walking. The street grew busier. Neighbors out watering plants, kids kicking balls, delivery drones buzzing overhead. Every pair of eyes turned to them as they strolled past. The rugged man and his radiant fox girl wife, leash glinting softly in the sunlight. Kia waved cheerfully to everyone, her confidence unshaken. But Mason noticed something shift in her posture, a slight hesitation in her step, the way her ears angled backward. He slowed beside her. "Hey, you okay?" She forced a smile. "Of course, just realizing how many people are watching." He looked around. She wasn't wrong. A group across the street had stopped to film. Someone whispered into their calm, probably gossiping. Mason felt something old stir in him. Protectiveness, that instinct from his soldier days. "Let them," he said finally, voice steady but low. "They can stare all they want." Kira blinked up at him. "You really don't care." "Not even a little," he said. "Because when I look at you, I don't see what they see. I see the woman who made me laugh again, who patched me up when I couldn't sleep, who burns breakfast every single day but still insists on cooking." Her eyes shimmered with something more than amusement now. "Mason." He shrugged lightly, almost embarrassed. "You wanted to walk? This is us walking. And if the universe can't handle it, that's their problem." For a long second, she didn't say anything. Then her hand found his gently, deliberately, and she squeezed. The leash slackened between them, forgotten. Her smile returned, small but genuine. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled back. "For what?" "For walking with me, and not just outside." He blinked. "That's supposed to be poetic. Maybe stick to science, sweetheart." She laughed, brushing her shoulder against his. As they kept walking, the tension lifted down the street. A car slowed, its driver craning for a better look. Kira lifted her chin proudly and gave a regal little wave. Mason couldn't help but laugh. And somewhere between the curious stares, the quiet humor, and the golden evening light, he realized this, ridiculous as it was, might just be the happiest he'd felt in years. Not because it made sense, but because it didn't need to. He'd spent a lifetime fighting for dignity, reputation, purpose. Yet here, leash in hand, walking beside the most unpredictable soul he'd ever met, he finally understood something simple. Love isn't dignified, it's brave. By the time Mason and Kira reached the riverside, the light had softened to a golden hue, spilling over the water in molten streaks. The leash between them gleamed faintly, swaying in rhythm with their steps. It should have been a quiet, peaceful stroll. But the galaxy, it seemed, had other plans. A small hover drone zipped overhead with a soft beep. Then another, then three. Within minutes, a low hum followed them like a trail of digital bees. Korea noticed first. She said, tilting her head. "Mason, why are there more of them?" He squinted upward. "Because someone somewhere decided we're entertainment." Sure enough, one drone projected a hovering subtitle. "Live human walks. Fox girl wife. Adorable or absurd." Another displayed to vote tally already climbing past 10,000 views. Kira gasped, mortified. "We're streaming." "Oh no. Mason, I didn't even brush my tail properly." Mason's lips twitched. "That's what you're worried about." She flailed slightly, grabbing his arm. "This is terrible. My fur looks wind-blown." "Sweetheart, we're literally the strangest thing happening on this planet right now. I think people will forgive a messy tail." A ripple of laughter followed them. Onlookers now aware of the spectacle. Couples pointed. Kids cheered. A few curious aliens joined in the mix. One shouted, "Walk her faster, human," while another yelled, "She's got better posture than I do." Mason just sighed, straightening his jacket. "Great. I've officially become a public trainer." Kir's ears drooped slightly. Maybe this was too much. Maybe everyone's laughing at us. Mason looked at her then, not the amused, unbothered glance he usually gave, but something steadier, deeper. "You think I care what they think?" She blinked. "Well, don't you?" He stopped walking, and the leash went slack between them. "Kyria," he said quietly, "I used to live for what people thought. Commanders, soldiers, strangers, didn't matter. Every decision was about keeping face, keeping rank, keeping order. And you know what? That got me." She tilted her head. "What?" "Nothing. Just scars and silence." He exhaled slowly. "Then you showed up in my life, spilling tea, burning food, tripping over everything. And somehow you made me laugh again. You made me live. So if walking you down a street makes the whole planet stare, fine. He lifted the leash slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. They can stare all they want because you're mine, Kir. And I'm proud of that. Her breath hitched, not out of embarrassment, but from the emotion that welled in her chest. For once, she was the one speechless. Around them, the crowd noise faded into a distant hum. Mason, she whispered, voice trembling slightly. You mean that? Wouldn't have said it if I didn't. Her tail slowly wagged again, low and steady, glowing in the sunlight. You realize you just confessed in front of 1 million viewers, right? He smirked. Good. Saves me from having to do it again. Kira covered her face with her hands, half laughing, half teary. You are impossible. And yet, he murmured, stepping closer. You love me anyway. The drones hovered silently, auto-zooming on the two of them. The moment was cinematic, human and hybrid standing together by the glowing river, her collar catching the sunset like a halo, his hands still holding the leash with the gentlest of grips. When she lowered her hands, her smile had changed. It wasn't her mischievous grin or her teasing smirk. It was soft, full and real. You know, she said, when I asked you to walk me, I didn't actually think you'd say yes. Yeah. Well, he said, shrugging. You ask weird things. I figured one of them had to be worth trying. She laughed, wiping her eyes. You make it sound like I'm an experiment. He chuckled. You kind of are the successful one. Kira tilted her head. You don't regret this. He shook his head. Not one bit. I'm done caring what the world thinks. You're happy. That's all that matters. And as if on cue, someone nearby clapped. Then another and another. Within seconds, 12 strangers were applauding them, laughing, cheering, filming, shouting things like, you two are amazing. And relationship goals. Korea's ears perked up, her tail wagging uncontrollably. They're clapping for us. Of course they are, Mason said dryly. Everyone loves a good circus. She laughed, still blushing. But this time, she stood taller. Well, then, let's give them a show. She took his hand, lifted her chin proudly, and resumed walking, leash still attached, but head high, heart lighter than ever. Mason followed, shaking his head with a faint smile. You're going to get us on every gossip feed from here to Luna. She glanced back, winking. Then you better start practicing your smile for the camera, Mr. Voss. And for the first time since leaving the military, Mason realized he didn't mind being seen. Not like this, not beside her. The leash wasn't a chain. It was a connection. A silly, sweet, ridiculous symbol of trust. And as they walked hand in hand, the cameras rolling, Mason Voss, the once broken soldier, finally looked like a man who had something to live for. The applause faded into the hum of city twilight as they crossed the riverside bridge. The light had gone amber pink now, reflecting off the water and fractured ribbons. Kirio walked a step ahead, tail brushing the air, her laughter carried on the breeze. Mason followed behind, leash loose in his hand, expression somewhere between disbelief and admiration. He still couldn't decide which was stranger. The fact that people were cheering for them or the fact that he didn't feel embarrassed anymore. Either way, he was oddly peaceful. The world for once seemed to make sense. They stopped at the middle of the bridge, leaning against the railing as the city shimmered to life. Neon signs flickered to full glow in the distance. Distant trains hummed along magnetized rails. The water rippled below, catching bits of light like scattered jewels. Korea exhaled softly. You know, she said, watching the river. When I first came to Earth, I thought it was cold. Not just the air, people too. So guarded, so careful. Like warmth was something they had to ration. Mason looked over quiet. You weren't wrong. I didn't understand it, she continued. On my world, if someone stares at you, you stare back. You talk, you laugh, you ask why. Here, everyone looks away. I thought maybe I didn't belong. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the sunset. Then I met you. You didn't look away. He smiled faintly. Hard to ignore someone who crashes through a glass door on day one. She puffed her cheeks. That door was very clean. He laughed, the sound low and genuine. Yeah, I remember. They stood there a while, the leash swaying lightly between them in the evening wind. Kira fiddled with the collar's charm, the metal catching flecks of gold light. When I asked you to walk me, she said quietly, I thought you'd laugh or maybe lecture me. I just wanted to do something together. Something silly, something human. He looked down at her, this whirlwind of fur, fire, and unfiltered sincerity, and realized she was trembling slightly. Not from cold, but from vulnerability. "Korea," he said softly. "Look at me." She did. "I don't care if it's silly," he said. "You make it make sense. You make everything make sense." Her tail stilled, then slowly wagged again, the movement small and rhythmic. "You mean that completely?" he said. "I've been through war, loss, everything that breaks a person down, and I still never felt as alive as I do when you're next to me." Kira's ears flicked, her expression softening. "That's unfair." "How so?" She smiled through her tears. "Because now I can't tease you after something like that." Mason chuckled. "Sure you can. You just have to be creative." She sniffled, then laughed, half cry, half giggle, and threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "You're a menace." He wrapped one arm around her, the other still holding the leash loosely at his side. "Takes one to marry one." A small crowd had gathered on the other side of the bridge, quietly watching, not mocking, but smiling. Even the drones had stopped worrying. Their lights dimmed as if giving the couple privacy. It was one of those rare moments when even technology knew to be still. When Ka finally pulled back, her cheeks glistened, but her smile was radiant. "You know," she said softly, "I think you just walked me through something bigger than a park." "Yeah?" he asked, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "What's that?" "Every fear I still had," she whispered. "Of not belonging. Of being too much." Mason leaned closer, forehead resting lightly against hers. "Kira, you could be too much for the whole galaxy, and I'd still think it's not enough." Her laugh came out as a breathy hiccup. "You're getting sappy. Must be the leash fumes," he said. She laughed again, loud, full, contagious. The kind of laugh that melted the city noise around them until there was nothing left but them and the slow rhythm of their hearts. They stayed there a while, just watching the light fade, no longer needing to fill the silence. The leash still hung between them, a ridiculous symbol that somehow meant everything. Not control, not ownership, but trust. The kind of trust that said, "I choose you even when the world stares." Finally, Kyrie tugged at the leash playfully. "So," she said, mischievous sparkle returning to her eyes. "Does this mean you'll walk me again tomorrow?" He gave her a side glance, pretending to think. Depends. You planning to roll in any mud puddles this time?" She gasped in mock offense. "Excuse me, I am a lady." "Uh-huh. You also tried to chase a delivery drone last week. That drone stole my muffin." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're unbelievable." "And you," she said proudly, "are mine." He smiled warm and easy, holding the leash with the gentlest of grips. When she lowered her hands, her smile had changed. It wasn't her mischievous grin or her teasing smirk. It was soft, full, and real. "You know," she said, "when I asked you to walk me, I didn't actually think you'd say yes." "Yeah. Well," he said, shrugging. "You ask weird things. I figured one of them had to be worth trying." She laughed, wiping her eyes. "You make it sound like I'm an experiment." He chuckled. "You kind of are the successful one." Kira tilted her head. "You don't regret this." He shook his head. "Not one bit. I'm done caring what the world thinks. You're happy. That's all that matters." And as if on cue, someone nearby clapped. Then another and another. Within seconds, a dozen strangers were applauding them, laughing, cheering, filming, shouting things like, "You too are amazing." And relationship goals. Korea's ears perked up, her tail wagging uncontrollably. "They're clapping for us." "Of course they are," Mason said dryly. "Everyone loves a good circus." She laughed, still blushing. But this time, she stood taller. "Well, then, let's give them a show." She took his hand, lifted her chin proudly, and resumed walking, leash still attached, but head high, heart lighter than ever. Mason followed, shaking his head with a faint smile. "You're going to get us on every gossip feed from here to Luna." She glanced back, winking. "Then you better start practicing your smile for the camera, Mr. Voss." And for the first time since leaving the military, Mason realized he didn't mind being seen. Not like this, not beside her. The leash wasn't a chain. It was a connection. A silly, sweet, ridiculous symbol of trust. And as they walked hand in hand, the cameras rolling, Mason Voss, the once broken soldier, finally looked like a man who had something to live for. The applause faded into the hum of city twilight as they crossed the riverside bridge. The light had gone amber pink now, reflecting off the water and fractured ribbons. Kirio walked a step ahead, tail brushing the air. Her laughter carried on the breeze. Mason followed behind, leash loose in his hand, expression somewhere between disbelief and admiration. He still couldn't decide which was stranger, the fact that people were cheering for them or the fact that he didn't feel embarrassed anymore. Either way, he was oddly peaceful. The world for once seemed to make sense. They stopped at the middle of the bridge, leaning against the railing as the city shimmered to life. Neon signs flickered to full glow in the distance. Distant trains hummed along magnetized rails. The water rippled below, catching bits of light like scattered jewels. Korea exhaled softly. "You know," she said, watching the river. "When I first came to Earth, I thought it was cold. Not just the air, people too. So guarded, so careful. Like warmth was something they had to ration." Mason looked over quiet. "You weren't wrong. I didn't understand it," she continued. "On my world, if someone stares at you, you stare back. You talk, you laugh, you ask why. Here, everyone looks away. I thought maybe I didn't belong." She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the sunset. "Then I met you. You didn't look away." He smiled faintly. Hard to ignore someone who crashes through a glass door on day one. She puffed her cheeks. "That door was very clean." He laughed, the sound low and genuine. "Yeah, I remember." They stood there a while, the leash swaying lightly between them in the evening wind. Kira fiddled with the collar's charm, the metal catching flecks of gold light. "When I asked you to walk me," she said quietly, "I thought you'd laugh or maybe lecture me. I just wanted to do something together. Something silly, something human." He looked down at her, this whirlwind of fur, fire, and unfiltered sincerity, and realized she was trembling slightly. Not from cold, but from vulnerability. "Korea," he said softly, "look at me." She did. "I don't care if it's silly," he said. "You make it make sense. You make everything make sense." Her tail stilled, then slowly wagged again, the movement small and rhythmic. "You mean that completely?" he said. "I've been through war, loss, everything that breaks a person down, and I still never felt as alive as I do when you're next to me." Kira's ears flicked, her expression softening. "That's unfair." "How so?" She smiled through her tears. "Because now I can't tease you after something like that." Mason chuckled. "Sure you can. You just have to be creative." She sniffled, then laughed, half cry, half giggle, and threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "You're a menace." He wrapped one arm around her, the other still holding the leash loosely at his side. "Takes one to marry one." A small crowd had gathered on the other side of the bridge, quietly watching, not mocking, but smiling. Even the drones had stopped worrying. Their lights dimmed as if giving the couple privacy. It was one of those rare moments when even technology knew to be still. When Ka finally pulled back, her cheeks glistened, but her smile was radiant. "You know," she said softly, "I think you just walked me through something bigger than a park." "Yeah?" he asked, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "What's that?" "Every fear I still had," she whispered. "Of not belonging. Of being too much." Mason leaned closer, forehead resting lightly against hers. "Kira, you could be too much for the whole galaxy, and I'd still think it's not enough." Her laugh came out as a breathy hiccup. "You're getting sappy. Must be the leash fumes," he said. She laughed again, loud, full, contagious. The kind of laugh that melted the city noise around them until there was nothing left but them and the slow rhythm of their hearts. They stayed there a while, just watching the light fade, no longer needing to fill the silence. The leash still hung between them, a ridiculous symbol that somehow meant everything. Not control, not ownership, but trust. The kind of trust that said, "I choose you even when the world stares." Finally, Kyrie tugged at the leash playfully. "So," she said, mischievous sparkle returning to her eyes, "does this mean you'll walk me again tomorrow?" He gave her a side glance, pretending to think. Depends. You planning to roll in any mud puddles this time?" She gasped in mock offense. "Excuse me, I am a lady." "Uh-huh. You also tried to chase a delivery drone last week. That drone stole my muffin." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're unbelievable." "And you," she said proudly, "are mine." He smiled warm and easy. "You'd hate it. That you'd think it was childish." "I did think it was childish," Mason said. "Still do." She tilted her head up, mock glare in place. "You're supposed to follow that with something sweet." He smiled faintly. "But it was also the best time I've had in years." Kira froze for half a beat, eyes wide. You're serious completely? He said, resting his head back against the couch. Haven't laughed that hard or felt that relaxed since, well, before the war. Her tail slowed its sway, then curled tighter around him. Then I'm glad I asked. Yeah, he murmured, eyes half closed. Me too. They sat there in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the city through the window. Kira fiddled with a little charm that had hung from her collar. You know, she said softly, when you said all that stuff about not caring what people think, I wanted to say something back. We're down the hall. A kid laughed and Kia's ears twitched at the sound. You think they'll still talk about us tomorrow? Oh, definitely, Mason said. Probably already a trending topic. Good, she said proudly. Let them talk. Maybe they'll realize love doesn't have to fit a template. He smiled at that, at her stubbornness, her optimism, her unfiltered heart. You always do that, he said. Turn something ridiculous into something wise. I'm multi-talented, she replied, tail flicking. Mason chuckled quietly and wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her in closer. You really are. She melted into him, a soft sigh leaving her lips. Hey, Mason, if I ever ask you to do something weird again, would you? He gave it a beat of mock deliberation. Depends. Does it involve leashes? Maybe, she teased. He groaned. You're incurable. She grinned against his shoulder. And you love it. Unfortunately, he said. Yeah, I do. They stayed like that, tangled together long after the lights dimmed outside. Kira's tail occasionally twitched, brushing against his arm as she started to doze. Mason sat still, listening to her breathing even out, and thought about how strange it was that peace could look like this. An ex-soldier and a fox girl on a couch surrounded by half-washed dishes and the faint smell of burnt toast. He looked down at her, sleepy, smiling, perfectly content, and whispered, You're out of your mind, Kira. She murmured without opening her eyes. And you married me anyway. He grinned. Yeah, best mistake I ever made. Her tail flicked once more before settling still. The city hummed softly around them. Somewhere on the galactic net, people were still watching the clips, arguing whether the leash walk was romantic or ridiculous. But in their little apartment, none of that mattered. For Mason Voss, the war was long over. For Kira, the fear of not belonging had finally gone quiet. And together, they'd somehow managed to find something better than acceptance. Contentment. Morning found the apartment awash in pale gold. Mason was halfway through his first cup of coffee when Kira burst out of the bedroom, phone tablet in hand, tail swishing like a metronome gone rogue. Mason Voss, she cried. We're famous. He didn't even flinch again. She skidded to a stop beside him, thrusting the screen under his nose. On it played a newsreel. The leash of love, human and hybrid, redefined public affection. Clips of them walking, laughing. Even the hydrant joke looped in slow motion. Someone had added romantic music and sparkle filters. Mason groaned. Please tell me that's edited. It's beautiful, Kira declared. They called you the stoic handler of hearts. He took a long sip of coffee. Great. My reputation's ruined in 4 galaxies. She ignored the sarcasm, scrolling through the comments. Look, most wholesome thing I've seen all year. If my husband won't walk me like that, I don't want him. Oh, and someone made fan art. He peered over her shoulder. Sure enough, a digital painting of them under the bridge, hands entwined, captioned, Love is a leash you choose to hold. Mason chuckled despite himself. Not bad. They even got my grumpy face right. Curious, smirked. You have a brand now. Fantastic. I'll sell mugs. The doorbell chimed. Mason frowned, rising to answer. But before he reached it, the screen blinked. Drone delivery. A parcel dropped through the slot with a soft thud. Carrier pounced on it immediately. It's addressed to both of us, she said, tearing it open. Inside was a velvet box containing a collar, sleek metallic silver with the engraving to the couple who walked into our hearts. Mason blinked. Please tell me that's not from a sponsorship deal. It's from the Petar Corporation. She read, eyes sparkling. They want us to be ambassadors. He stared. You're joking. I never joke about contracts with discount codes. Mason rubbed his temples. I fought in 2 wars, Kira. 2. And this is how I go down in history. Loved by millions, she offered. Humiliated by millions. Same thing with better lighting, she teased. He sighed, defeated, and sat back down. Kira plopped onto his lap without asking, curling her tail around them both. She held up the silver collar against his neck. What do you think? I think if you try to put that on me, I'm moving to Mars. She grinned. So, next walk. He gave her a long look, then laughed, a warm, unguarded sound. You really don't quit, do you? Not when I'm happy, she said simply. Her honesty always hit him harder than he expected. He brushed a finger under her chin. Then maybe I don't want you to, she beamed, tail thumping lightly against the couch. So it's a yes. Fine, he said, pretending exasperation. Tomorrow, but no press drones, no hydrants, and absolutely no posing. I make no promises. They both laughed until their sides ached. Kyria leaned against him again, eyes half closed. You know, she murmured. For someone who claims to hate attention, you're very photogenic. Remind me to thank the combat lighting training. I'll thank you instead, she whispered for saying yes yesterday. Mason kissed the top of her head. Wouldn't trade it for anything. The quiet stretched between them, comfortable, alive. Outside, the city screens replayed their walk-on loop. Neighbors gossiped. Someone even started a Walk Your Hybrid challenge. But inside their apartment, it was just the two of them, tangled together in soft morning light, laughing about everything and worrying about nothing. Kira reached for his coffee, stole a sip, and made a face. Still too bitter. You keep saying that, and yet you keep stealing it. It tastes like you, she said matter-of-factly. He blinked. That was weird. Romantic, she corrected. Terrifying, she giggled. We'll call it even. The day rolled on. Mason fixed a squeaky vent. Kira tried and failed to cook pancakes without setting off the smoke alarm. When the window caught the late afternoon sun, he found her sitting on the balcony rail, humming softly, the silver collar in her lap. He leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. You planning your next experiment? She looked over her shoulder with a grin that was pure mischief. Maybe there's a flyer for a couple's agility course downtown. Team events, obstacles, prizes, Mason groaned. You are not turning our marriage into a sport. Too late, she said brightly. We're already champions of the walk. He laughed, shaking his head. You're going to be the end of me. Her tail curled playfully. Then at least I'll walk you there. And for once, Mason didn't argue. Because in a world obsessed with rules and appearances, a man who had once fought to survive had finally learned to live. Because one fox girl dared him to stop caring and start walking. If you smiled through Mason and Carrier's walk, hit subscribe and walk with us through the next.